Okay, connecting to cloud, recording. Yes. All right, excellent. So this is our Tuesday check-in. Um, before I start, does anyone have any pressing questions that you want to ask? Anything that's come up, say, in the past few days or in the past week or so? One thing I do want to mention, it's come to my attention, came to my attention yesterday, that if you were added to the course, either of the courses, either the Learning Communities course or the Standard 1301, if you're added to either one of those um, after the first week of class, so in other words, if you were really after the first day, because there was that period of the first 2 weeks where people were still, coming into the class. So Blackboard was supposed to enroll you automatically in groups, which is how I had it set up in Blackboard. That did not happen. So if you join the class after the beginning of the course, you're probably not enrolled in a group. So in the way that you find out whether you're enrolled in a group or not, I'll show you here in a second. But if it turns out that you're not enrolled in a group, text me and let me know so that I can enroll you manually. Okay. Because that's how you're going to do your peer edit and so forth. And also that's where the discussion boards are, and all the invention exercises are, and so forth. And I'll go through some of that. So admittedly, I'm far more behind this week than I want to be as far as commenting on the essays. But I have begun that process. So you all will be getting your essays back with some comments, and I'm trying to identify solid areas in the essays where you can revise, trying to point you to some specific areas in each essay that could use one or more degrees of revision, different types of revision. In many cases, it's areas that you can clarify, it's additional information, it's additional description. For instance, if you're talking about a family member or something like that, and you don't give any physical description, right? It's hard for the reader to really zero in on that if they don't know what the person looks like, don't have a vision of the person. So those types of things. I will say, of the essay, and again, so far the essays that I've looked at are of people that basically turn their essays in early, because I generally look at them by the order that they were submitted. So I'm looking, the first few obviously are of people that turned it in early. So, but I will say that of what I'm looking at, I'm not seeing anything that's terribly just, oh my God, what are these people doing? I'm not seeing anything like that. I'm fairly impressed actually, and generally speaking, that goes for the reflective essays as well. Most of your writing is pretty solid. Granted, there's some grammatical foibles here and there that tend to be fairly common, not only with freshman writers, but with writers in general. For example, like comma splices and things like that. And on a couple of people's reflections and so forth, I may have put in the comments, hey, you might want to look at run-on sentences or something. But I don't want that to be the focus. I don't want people to be paranoid, right, and think, oh God, I've got how many run-on sentences do I? I don't want that environment. So I may point those things out to you, but that's not a deal breaker per se, right? It's now when we start moving into English 1302 next semester, and then beyond that, when you get into writing for the discipline, when you're writing for your specific major and so forth, those things become the grammatical issues and so forth. They become a little bit more pertinent because, unfortunately, you know, we live in a society of judgment, right? We live in a society such that everyone is assessing, everyone is judging, everyone is evaluating each other all the time. And if you're in a situation where, for example, you're working for a company, or you know, you're working on a team or whatever it may be, and you have to send an email out to your team, and you send that email out and it's got like 6 or 7 grammatical errors in it, and say the head of that team or the head of that company or whatever that receives your email, they're not very familiar with you personally. The only interaction with you they may receive is through text, through email, through texting, whatever. And if you're sending that person a bunch of stuff, if you're sending that person an item that's got a bunch of grammatical errors in it, that person may incorrectly assess your ability based on those grammatical errors. So in those kinds of instances, that kind of stuff can communicate something that you don't want it to communicate. But at this stage, you know, I'm trying not to, you know, make it be like, oh, I don't want you to be like paranoid about things like that right now. So, or really ever, but I want you to be aware of how certain audiences, and that's the key. It's all about audience, right? How certain audiences might view certain occurrences in your writing, like grammatical error and so forth, right? That's one of the reasons that, for example, in 1301 in particular, we emphasize audience. Is that, you know, to whom are you writing? You know, who's the intended recipient of these projects, right? Obviously, the intended recipient of the reflections is me, because I'm the one that's reading them, right? And I don't, you know, I'm not expecting you to key into, you know, what I like, or I'm not expecting you to do that. I'm not, you know, but as far as your major projects go, think about to whom are you writing this? You know, is it, you know, people who've had similar people within your age range, within other communities that you occupy, like, you know, your community, your geographical community, your community of faith, your ethnic community, your social community, you know, whatever may be. To whom are you writing this, right? I've had very successful projects written, particularly the option on the narrative where you are, the option one where you're comparing, you know, two different obligations and how you negotiate those obligations, right? I've had a very successful papers, versions of that written, I should say, in letter form, right, where the author is actually writing a letter to someone that was central to that conflict, right? Like, I think I can remember a young man writing to, you know, his supervisor at a particular job, you know, where this supervisor made the job, you know, nearly impossible, right? And so he was writing, you know, his perspective on all these occurrences, you know, and it just worked out beautifully, in the sense that, you know, the audience was so clear, right? Because it was addressed to this particular person. So anyway, just keep the idea of audience in mind, because audience, that's going to determine the language that you use. I've brought this up before, you know, with the example of your grandmother, right? There's certain language probably that you wouldn't use with your grandmother that you would use, say, with your best friend or something like that, right? So, you know, my companion Coconut is very enthusiastic apparently right now about something outside. So if you hear barking in the background, I apologize. So anyway, I'm going to run through a few things, some nuances with regard to, okay, yeah, nobody's saying anything in the chat. I'm going to run through some things to clarify some things on Blackboard or with Blackboard, so that everybody's kind of on the same page. I also covered a lot of this in my video that I posted on Sunday about the peer edit and about Blackboard functionality, but I want to do this also in real time with you, so that if you have any questions, we can address that here. But if you recall from last week, this has come up several times, and again, you know, I don't want to repeat myself a whole lot, because you all, you know, actually come on here and attend the calls live, and so a lot of this is probably retreading stuff that you're already aware of. But it had, you know, the whole issue of how the discussion boards are assessed, and do people need to do the stuff on the discussion boards, you know, that has come up several times in the past week. And some of you will recall, whether you were on the call last time or you watched the video from last week, that I talked about the discussion boards and the whole rationale behind the discussion boards on last week's call. And that the whole idea is a discussion board is a place for you to develop trust and community with the people in your group, because ultimately these are the people that are going to be peer reviewing your essays, right? So you want to develop trust with them, and ideally you want to get to know each other in the sense that, you know, maybe you can rely on each other for feedback and things like that as well, and support in other ways maybe. But the idea is that a lot of what people are saying in reflections, and I do understand this, is that a lot of what you miss about in-person classes is a sense of community, right? A sense of, you know, seeing the people in the class and so forth. I mean, to be honest with you, I find this to be far more efficient, you know, because we're not, I mean, I can't tell you, you know, how many classes I've taught over 21 years, 22 years of essentially teaching college writing in various universities and colleges and such. You know, how many classes I ask, you know, I'll talk for 20 minutes and I'll ask, you know, well, is there a question? Is it, you know, and the whole room just kind of like stares back at me, you know, and then I just kind of say, well, okay. And then I'll let people work on their projects or whatever. But so in many ways, this is far more efficient, because, you know, I'm getting out the information to you, and, you know, you have these various ways that you can get in touch with me. Again, the easiest, the quickest way is through text. And of course, the text number is on the syllabus. But also, you know, you can send me an email or whatever as well. But often what happens in classes, you know, what can't really be duplicated in this medium is in classes, you know, people get into odd conversation. You know, well, odd is not the correct word, but people get into conversations about pertinent things that they're interested in. Whether it's, you know, whether somebody's, you know, on their phone and they see some kind of meme and they start talking about some kind of meme and whatever, and it kind of enters into the classroom conversation. And so that kind of free form communication is not necessarily available in this medium. So that is a disadvantage, right? So, but yeah, and frankly, just by way of anecdotally at this point, there's not plans to go fully back to 100% in-person classes until there's a viable vaccine for COVID. So we're talking about probably maybe this time next year. I'm already, for example, my classes for the spring will be online instruction. And I imagine it's going to be that way for for a lot of you, for a lot of your professors and so forth, because yeah, it's just the world. It's just the world we live in. You know, I've gone out. I live in one room, right? I live, well, I mean, you know, it's not a small room. It's not a large room either. But you know, I live in a studio apartment, and I've gone out maybe 6 times, something like that, 6, 7 times, 8 times since March. You know, so and that's including, you know, going to the drive-through at Walmart to pick up medication, things like that. So, you know, it is what it is. So anyway, yes, let me do screen share and okay, it's probably loading, but once it shares, you'll be able to see my this is my Tamusa page. So I'm going to go over to Blackboard. Now at this point, whether you're in the Learning Communities class or the regular class, I hate to say regular, Learning Communities, for those of you that don't know what Learning Community is, in a Learning Community, this class is paired with your University 1301, so that there's some overlap, some communication. It's been a little different with COVID and so forth. I mean, in the circumstances last year, I taught both the University 1301, or what was University 1301 at that time, and the 1301. So there was a lot more cohesion and so forth, and so I taught both of the sections, and so the students actually worked with me twice. But anyway, that's the only difference, is that those two courses are not. I mean, the gentleman that's teaching the University 1301 is great. He's fantastic. It's just that with COVID and so forth, it's been a little odd. And then probably you will, if you're in the learning community, you'll go on to. Last year it was I paired with Dr. Briscoe in history, and that was an absolutely fantastic experience working with him. And he and I have worked on, well, we had to work online together because of what happened last spring after spring break, and that does, and he and I are experienced working online together. So if that happens, then we can still carry the learning community over that way. But all right. In any case, that's anecdotal information, but we'll go in here, and I just want to show you a few things, make sure everybody's on the same page. So of course, you can go to course content. One thing, let me see. Well, you can't see that screen. Okay, we'll go to course content, and I'll show you. So week 5. This is the week we're on. So just to show you, when I mention discussion board or say anything about discussion board, what I'm talking about is the way that you access this. So in the weeks, the folders for the week, right? There'll be the collaborative creativity group. Now you click on this. Now, obviously, I mean, I've got the list here of all 15 groups. You're not going to see that. You're only going to see the one that you are enrolled in, if you're enrolled in a group. If you don't see a group, you probably are not enrolled in one, because of when you join the class. And I can go in and I can manually put you in a group. So for example, some of these groups, all these groups started out with 4 people in them. Some of them are down to 2. Some of them have 3. It's because people have dropped out. Okay. But when you click on your group, what you should see this menu here. And I'll just run down through this menu. And some of you may be familiar with this from other classes, some of you may not. So I'm just going to go through this to show you. So Collaborate, what this is it's basically a Zoom, right? It's a Zoom within Blackboard, right? So you can use this if you want to have a meeting with people in your group to just, to talk about peer editing, to talk about like there'll be later on in the semester, there will be a collaborative portion for one of the discussion board invention exercises for the profile project, which is the next project that we'll be doing. There'll be a collaborative portion on the discussion board for that. You can use the Collaborate room for that if you want to. But it's basically your own. It's a private, basically a private Zoom room for your group. Okay, so now file exchange. So when you're doing your peer edit, one thing you can do is you can actually upload your drafts onto this file exchange. And then the person who peer edits your work can come on the file exchange and pull it off, right? Group blog, that's pretty self-explanatory. I'll come back to the group journal, same thing. I'll come back to the discussion board here in a minute. Group tasks, if you want to like set tasks for yourself or other members of your group, you can do that. This, of course, requires a great deal of participation in the groups, which we aren't having right now, and I'll get to that here in a minute. One thing I do want to point out to you, now you can, like I clicked on send email, you can actually email all the members of your group, see, or so for example, you can email your group members your contact information. You can, and so on. You can ask for people to peer edit your document, so on and so forth. You can email your essay to a group member, so on, right? You can email your group members your feedback, right, from the peer edit, okay? So you can, that's the email function. All right, so let's look at the discussion board. Okay, so this group actually has some participation. It looks like one person has been participating above and beyond the rest of them, though. But I want to call your attention to the peer edit. So the idea of this peer edit is that over the course of this week and maybe into next week, depending on when you can get, because we have 3 weeks in essence before the final draft of your narrative is due. So in those 3 weeks between now and when that final draft is due, at the end of September, okay. Actually, I can't remember the due date on it exactly. It's either the last week of September or the first week in October. I think it's probably the first week in October. Oh, anyway, it's on the syllabus. In fact, I'll just look on the syllabus real quick. Nope, don't have the syllabus up. Anyway, I'll bring it up here in a minute. But in any case, the idea is that you will solicit either on the discussion board or through emailing your group members, like I just showed you the email function, and so forth, you will ask for someone in your group to peer edit your work. What they're going to do is in some way, whether it's putting the responses on the discussion board, emailing you back the responses, they, if they get really, if they have the time. In fact, in some cases, this might even be easier for some people. They could record a video of talking about your essay, whatever, and send you a link to it, whatever it may be, whatever the medium that they choose to do and that you're able to do. Y'all can do peer editing on Google Docs. I don't want Google Docs turned into me for the various reasons that I've discussed. But if y'all want to peer edit, if y'all are comfortable peer editing on Google Docs, you can certainly do that. Because the peer edit material is not coming back to me. It doesn't go to me. It goes between the people who are peer editing, okay? What comes to me is the reflection on the process, right? Your weekly reflections. These are your peer editing prompts for this first essay, for the narrative essay. Now, you want to approach this essay as if it were your own. In other words, as you would want somebody else to approach yours. So you don't want to give people one-line answers, okay, or yes or no answers. You want to give them responses that indicate critical thinking, indicate that you actually spent time with their essay, and so forth. So I would say for all 6 of these, right, think about brief paragraphs for each of them. But in any case, you want to send them something back that is substantive, right? You want to send them something back that's substantive. Okay, but that goes back to the person whose work you're peer editing. Again, you can use the discussion board for that. You can do that in any sort of medium that you feel works for you. But the point is that each person should have their work peer edited by at least one person. Okay. That, and by contacting the people in your group and so forth, right? That's the idea with that. So, and then also in the process of revision, if you haven't dealt with the invention exercises that are on the discussion boards, you can also go back and do that, right? Because the idea is that if you're not doing the invention exercises, you're missing out on an opportunity to think in a more holistic way about your narrative and about the possibilities for your narrative. And you're also potentially missing out on the ability to build interaction with your group. Now, I didn't want to essentially police this. That's why I didn't, have like points attached, quote unquote, to any of this stuff on the discussion board, because I don't feel like, you should be well, for lack of a better term, policed in this environment, right? This is your creative environment, your work environment, so forth. So I didn't feel that was appropriate, but I do feel like you should take advantage of it. And ultimately, you know, as with everything else, anything you do on the discussion board um, is um, fuel for your weekly reflections, right? Let me go back to course content. So when you get, so far, everything that I've turned back to anyone this term, this is the first time in recent memory that I've been able to keep up this trend, even, you know, through this early in the semester. But so far, everything that I've submitted back to somebody has a comment of some sort on it, right? So when you look at your grades in Blackboard, the I believe it's a screen that has, you know, what your score was for the item. It should have a little uh, dialog box there that you can click on. That's where my comment is. Okay. I'm pretty sure that it's set up that way. Mine, of course, looks a whole lot different than yours, so I can't tell you that for certain, but if I remember correctly, that's the case. I do want to point out something to you, though. So if we click here, right, all of you are familiar with this screen by now. So one thing I want to point out, some people are clicking write submission and copying and pasting their essay into the submission box. Please do not do that. There are a number of reasons not to do that. Number one is that it destroys your formatting on your document. So I just get a big garble, you know, it's not garbled necessarily, but it's just a big block of text. So that's not ideal. Please upload using the browse my computer button, upload a PDF or a .docx file. So if you're going from Pages or Google Docs, you've got to make sure before you attempt to upload the document, you got to make sure that it's saved on your hard drive and it can be accessed by an external program, by a non-Google Docs or a non-Pages program, like, for example, Adobe Acrobat. You know, if you can access the file with Adobe Acrobat, it has successfully been converted to PDF. Because sometimes people will try to convert their stuff from Google Docs, and they try to set it to PDF, but in fact what they're still doing is they're still pulling directly from Google Docs, and you can't do that as far as Blackboard is concerned. You have to convert the document, save the converted document, make sure that it will open in a PDF reader, and then once you're certain that it can actually open in a PDF reader, then upload that document using the browse computer, and then of course the submit. Now, this is also what I wanted to point out. You have this comments box here. So this is an effort-based course, meaning that what's ultimately being assessed in terms of your grade for the end of the course, right? Your letter grade. And for those of you that are who are dual credit, you will also get a numerical grade. I hate numerical grades, but you know, your high school says you have to have them. So in any case, you know, I don't like grades at all. But this is kind of off topic, but oh well. So the course that I learned the most in my many years of education was a graduate course in linguistics from a gentleman who was one of the founders of sociolinguistics, as in he was a contemporary of Noam Chomsky. Uh, And in any case, there were no grades in that class. It was one assignment, and that the one assignment was to write a letter to the professor at the end of the term and tell him what we learned, right? And I promise you, I learned more in that class than I learned in any other class. And there were no grades, right? So grades are not the be-all, end-all of everything, right? Nor is traditional assessment. This, what we're doing here is very non-traditional. But so what we're assessing is the quality of the labor that you're putting into the course. So any point of interaction with me, in it, you know, and or your peers, right? That is a point at which to assess quality. So, and as indicated in the syllabus, turning in your stuff on time and complete, that's a major component of quality of labor. Why? Because you got to rearrange your schedule. You got to do, you've got to do, in many cases, a lot of mental gymnastics, and you know, to be able to do that, particularly, you know, during a pandemic. So if you don't turn something in, that is a letter grade, plain and simple. Doesn't matter what it is. You've got to turn everything in, and you should turn everything in on time. You have 2 days after the initial due date to get a late score on something. You can have up to 4 lates, or a combination of lates and incompletes, to get before you lose a letter grade. Okay. If you turn something in after 2 days after the due date, it basically, you can only do that twice and not lose a letter grade. Okay. That's explained on the syllabus, and I've explained it in many places, many of these talks so far. Some people are still not grasping that concept. Now, having said that, and this is where I get into the quality of labor issue. So if something major happens, and I mean, we are in a place, in a time in our lives where a lot of major stuff is happening. You know, as one of my colleagues put it, you know, disaster pedagogy, right? And, you know, we're not in quote unquote normal circumstances. So if something comes up, right? Number one, when the thing comes up, text me, let me know. Say, hey, you know, and you don't have to tell, you don't feel comfortable texting me very deeply personal details about your life. You don't have to do that. You can just tell me in general terms, you know, what's going on, without, you know, revealing something that you're not comfortable about. So anyway, but let me know something's going on. Now, that means if something comes up on a Wednesday, text me on a Wednesday, right? Don't text me on the Sunday or the Monday following, okay? Text me on the Wednesday, all right? And then when you submit your document that's late or whatever, that you aren't able to turn in on time, in this comments box, type in that you texted me about X, Y, and Z on the Wednesday, okay? When you do that, I'm far more likely to either count the piece on time or count it late as opposed to missing, okay? But you definitely need to contact me, preferably via text message, when something occurs as opposed to afterward, because that's that's courtesy, and courtesy is a form of quality labor, right? Think about if you were, so I'll frame this slightly differently. So some of you may ask, some of you may have asked yourselves this question before, some of you may not have thought about it before, but what's the difference between the behavioral difference between human beings and animals, right? I mean, animals, like for example, if you look at cows and dogs and many other mammals, right, are capable of deep emotion, right, and have memory. Like a cow can hold a grudge, right? For example, you know, and frankly, cows know in slaughterhouses have extremely high anxiety. And you know, there's a lot to be said for that. A lot to be said about the hormones that people are ingesting when they're ingesting products from creatures that are raised in factory farms and so on. But anyway, my point being is that that doesn't separate us from animals necessarily. It's said animals eat, sleep, mate, and defend. That's what they do, right? They eat and sleep, they have sex, procreate, and they defend. They defend themselves. They defend their territory, etc. Right? So human beings do all that. We just do it more, in many cases, in more complicated ways. Um, what differentiates the human being from the animal, according to many philosophical systems that have been around for a long time, is that human beings ask the big questions, right? Why am I here? Why is there death? You know, is there anything outside of what I am? You know, is there a supreme? What is my relationship to the supreme? So on and so forth, right? All of that. That's what separates the human being. In fact, some people say that one is not fully human until one begins to think critically, right? To begins to evaluate, discriminate, evaluate, assess one's environment and one's life in this manner. I say that because I'm going to draw. Most of us enter into higher, and again, in the higher education is a place to do that. We emphasize critical thinking and so forth. So you can take the skills that you're honing here and apply them to various aspects of your life. But most of us did not come to college, initially anyway, to develop critical thinking. Most of us came to college to learn to be able to eat, sleep, mate, and defend better. What I mean is, you know, if you grew up, like for example, I had a student last semester who wrote about growing up in a house with 17 people, right? If you grew up in a house with 17 people, you're going to college on some level, on a very significant level, probably, in a very significant point, to be able to not be in that situation anymore, right? And there's a lot to be said for that, because how can you think about, how can you think critically? How can you begin to engage the great questions of life if you're living in a house of 17 people? It'd be nearly impossible, right? So there is something noble and admirable to be said for that. But a lot of us, you know, so my point is this: if you are here ultimately to advance your capacity to have a particular career, right, to earn a particular living, you've got to think about your college courses as if they were part of that career, right? And if you're on a job, particularly if on a career, and you're given a task to do, right, by a team, and so forth, and you don't do that task, and you don't communicate with that team for a week, right, and then you don't, and you do communicate after the fact, right? Not only will you probably not be trusted by that team anymore, but you may not work in that field ever again. Because the more specialized your field is, the fewer people there are in the world that do that field. And your name will get thrown around out there, for good or ill. You will get a reputation. And you don't want to be the person that doesn't deliver. So courtesy is a form of quality labor. That's my point. Also, too, if you've committed to, this extends to things like peer editing, if you've committed to peer edit somebody's work by a certain day of the week, you need to do that because you've obligated yourself to that person, right? And that person could conceivably put in his or her reflection or their reflection that you didn't come through for them, right? And so what does that make your labor look like? All right. So that's my point. That's my point of that whole thing there. Okay. And frankly, they should have told you this stuff week 1 in University 1301. This should have been like day 1 after the syllabus type of stuff, right? Here's the other thing they should have told you. And usually when I'm in a traditional classroom, I say this the first day of class, and I probably should have said this in my syllabus video. I don't think I did. But the answer to absolutely every academic question that can be asked in any class ever, right? I don't care if it's University 1301, English 1301, or a graduate class in, whatever the graduate field may be. This question is this response is the correct answer to any question. If you don't know the specific answer. That is, I don't know, but I know how to look it up. That is a correct response. And that is a responsible response. So if a professor catches you in class unaware or something, or asks you a question to which you don't know the specific answer, you can respond and should respond, I don't know, but I know how to look it up. But the caveat there is you better know how to look it up then. Because I can guarantee you in most cases, the next class, the next encounter with that professor is going to ask you the same question again. Okay? But that is, so just keep that in mind. But those they should have told you that in University 1301. Anyway, I really wanted to teach that class, but because of COVID, it just everybody's stretched thin, and including my department. So I was needed in other areas. So, but anyway, I feel so sorry for y'all that live in the dorms. Y'all don't have Jello wrestling. You don't have drag shows. You don't have Rocky Horror Picture. You don't have all the stuff that you should be having as a part of your college experience. Y'all didn't even have that stuff before COVID. Now I just can't even imagine. So anyway, I'm going to stop the share because I'm just kind of, let's see, do we have anything in the chat? Nothing in the chat. Any questions before? I feel like in my is there something that I haven't addressed that you would like me to address, and put it that way? Nope, 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 nope. See, most of y'all I know are like straight on. Like I can see the names of everybody on my screen. So, I mean, y'all are pretty much, you know, y'all got everything together. All right. I'm just, if I don't end it now, I'm just going to keep blathering on. So, oh wait, I don't have any. Okay, I don't have any questions. Okay, awesome. All right. Um, so I will. I'll post this one along with the one from yesterday, and you know, like I said, it's going to take me a while to return the essays. We do have 3 weeks until the the final draft is due. But your obligation right now is to email your group members and try to get and solicit a someone to peer edit your piece. Part of the reason that I don't make the actual peer edit part of the credit, right, is because I don't want you to be stuck. I don't want you to be penalized, right, for somebody else not doing what they're supposed to do. So in other words, worst case scenario, if nobody peer edits your work and you've tried to reach out to 2 or 3 people and still nobody peer edits your work, that's what you write about in your reflection, right? You write about how you try to reach out to this person, you try to reach out to this person, and back and forth and something else. The other option that you have, right, if, say, for example, by next Friday, if you haven't heard from anybody with regards to peer edit, you can also you can also take you can also book a writing center uh, encounter, and they're all online this semester. So you can book a writing center encounter about your work. You might want to go ahead and do that anyway, just to, again, have another perspective. And again, anything, you know, that you feel is pertinent, you can write about in your weekly reflections. So if you have an encounter with the writing center, you know, if you go and you, like, some people, you know, they'll you know, consult like their high school English teacher or something, you know, something, anything that you feel is relevant, right, to the quality of the labor in the course, you can put in that reflection, right? Okay. All right. Thanks a lot, everyone. We are right at an hour, so I'm going to end. Have a great day.